I returned to Dad's farm. HOA guards blocked me from my own family land. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, we would like to ask you for one small favor. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you will not miss any of our latest videos. It only takes a moment, costs nothing, and is one of the best ways to help us continue creating powerful, emotional and dramatic stories like this one. Your support means more to us than you can imagine. Also, let us know where you are watching from today. Share your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much. Now, let us return to our main character. That gate is standing on my father's land. The guard barely looked up from his tablet when I said it. He just lifted one gloved hand and pointed back toward the county road, like I was a delivery driver who had missed an address. Dawn was breaking over the Tennessee hills, turning the wet pasture silver, and the steel entrance gate stood 3 feet in front of the hood of my father's old Ford F-250. A polished stone wall stretched into the grass on both sides, carrying brass letters that read Bellwether Ridge, residents only. The words looked expensive. Permanent. Wrong. I killed the engine, and the sudden silence made the ticking metal under the hood sound like a clock. Rainwater dripped from the oak branches. Somewhere beyond the wall, a pump hummed beneath the ground. I knew that road. I had ridden my bicycle down it at 12, driven a tractor over it at 16, and left tire marks in the gravel the night I walked away from my father at 21. There had never been a gate. There had never been guards. There had only been 2 cedar posts, a sagging strand of wire, and a hand-painted sign that said Callahan Farm. I could still see that sign behind the guard's shoulder, half hidden beside the new security booth. My name is Owen Callahan, I said. Thomas Callahan was my father. That road leads to my house. The second guard stepped closer. He was broad, clean-shaven, and wearing a black jacket embroidered with Bellwether Community Security. His badge said Brock Hensley. This is private HOA property now, Mr. Callahan. He said my name carefully, as if reading it from a warning notice. I handed him the deed packet, my driver's license, and the county letter confirming the transfer of my father's estate. The paper felt soft at the edges from how many times I had checked it during the 9-hour drive from Montana. Brock studied the first page for less than 5 seconds before handing everything back. Our records show the farm parcel was annexed into the community. Annexed by who? I asked. The answer arrived in the low whisper of a white Cadillac Escalade rolling up behind the booth. The driver's door opened, and Meredith Sloan stepped onto the wet pavement in cream-colored boots that had never touched real mud. She wore a pale raincoat, a gold HOA pin, and the calm smile of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Her perfume reached me before her voice did, sharp and floral against the smell of wet clay and diesel. Your father agreed to let us manage the abandoned portion of the property, she said. We've invested a considerable amount in improving it. I looked past her. Beyond the gate, fresh asphalt cut across our pasture. Decorative lights stood where my father's fence line used to run. Meredith's Escalade was parked on the same patch of ground where Dad had taught me to saddle a horse. My fingers closed around the brass key in my coat pocket, the one he had mailed me 2 months before he died, wrapped in newspaper without a note. My father never abandoned this land, I said. Meredith's smile tightened. Grief can make records difficult to accept. Then she gave Brock a small nod. The gate motor engaged with a smooth electric hum, and the steel bars began sliding shut between us. The sound pulled one last memory from the final phone call I ever had with my father. His breathing had been thin, his voice rough, but the words were clear. When you come home, son, don't trust the gate. Find what's under the sycamore. The gate finished closing with a soft mechanical click, and for a few seconds I sat behind the wheel with both hands resting on the cracked leather. My father had bought that truck used in 2004, back when the odometer still had 5 digits and the passenger door only rattled above 55 miles per hour. The cab smelled like dust, old coffee, and the pine soap he used on everything from work gloves to kitchen counters. I had spent 9 hours driving east with that smell beside me, pretending I was only returning to settle an estate. The truth was harder. I was coming home to a conversation I had postponed until there was nobody left to answer. Our farm covered 86 acres of rolling Tennessee ground, bordered by hickory woods on the north and a shallow creek on the south. My grandfather, Walter Callahan, bought it in 1961 with money saved from repairing farm equipment. He built the original barn by hand, using oak beams cut from the property. Dad added the machine shed, repaired the fences, and kept 23 head of cattle through years when feed prices rose and rain refused to fall. Nothing on that land had come easily. Every post had been dug through red clay. Every roof panel carried the mark of a man working alone because hiring help cost more than he had. I grew up measuring seasons by sounds. Calves calling before sunrise. Cicadas humming in July. The old well pump shuddering awake beneath the kitchen window. Dad believed land spoke through those sounds. He also believed a promise mattered more when nobody was watching. That belief was the reason he let neighbors use our gravel road during the flood of 1998, and why he hauled water to 3 families when their wells went dry. Kindness was never weakness to him. It was simply what decent people did. I had not understood that when I was 21. I wanted distance, steady money, and work that did not depend on weather. Dad wanted me to stay and learn the farm before his knees gave out. Our final argument happened beside the sycamore near the east pasture. I told him I was not going to spend my life repairing fences. He said a man should know what he was leaving before he walked away. I left the next morning and took a railroad maintenance job in Montana. For 18 years, we spoke in careful pieces. Weather. Equipment. The price of diesel. Never the argument. Never the empty chair between us. 2 months before he died, a small padded envelope arrived at my apartment. Inside was a brass key wrapped in the local newspaper. No letter. No explanation. I called him that night, but he only said, "Keep it somewhere safe." The week before his funeral, his voice had sounded thinner than I remembered. He told me not to trust the gate and to look beneath the sycamore. Then the connection broke. Sitting outside Bellwether Ridge, I opened the metal document box on the passenger floor. The county deed was there, along with the latest property tax receipt in Dad's name. Beneath them lay an old survey map, a short piece of rusted barbed wire, and a photograph of Dad standing beside the sycamore with one hand resting on its pale trunk. Someone had drawn a small circle near the roots in blue ink. On the back, in his blocky handwriting, were 5 words, "The line never moved, son." The blue circle on the photograph sat directly over the sycamore roots, but I could not reach it from the county road without crossing the gate Meredith claimed belonged to her. I folded the picture, slid it into my coat, and drove 3 miles south to a diner where Dad used to eat breakfast every Thursday. The place still smelled like bacon grease, burnt coffee, and lemon cleaner. I had barely taken a seat when Meredith walked in as if she had expected me to be there. She moved through the room with the polished confidence of someone who treated every public space like a board meeting. 2 women at the counter greeted her by name. A man near the window lowered his voice when she passed. Meredith sat across from me without asking and placed a glossy folder on the table. On the cover was an aerial photograph of Bellwether Ridge, 112 matching homes arranged around curved streets and ornamental ponds. My father's farm appeared at the edge, shaded pale green and labeled Future Community Reserve. "You should understand what has changed," she said. Her tone was gentle, almost sympathetic. "Your father was no longer able to maintain the eastern acreage. The association stepped in before it became a liability." I opened the folder. Inside were landscaping invoices, security reports, and a polished map showing our gravel road as Bellwether Ridge emergency access. The line cut through the pasture in a bright yellow band. The sycamore was missing. So was the creek bend that had marked the southern boundary for as long as I could remember. "Who prepared this survey?" I asked. "It was approved through the county." That was not my question. Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. The porcelain made a faint scraping sound against the saucer. "Mr. Callahan, I know this is emotional. Your father signed a permanent land management agreement nearly 4 years ago. In exchange, we maintained the road, cleared dangerous brush, and protected the property from trespassers." "You mean guards like Brock?" "Professional security," she corrected. "Bellwether Ridge has standards." She slid a copy of the agreement toward me. Dad's name appeared at the bottom in black ink. Thomas Callahan. The signature looked close enough to fool someone who had never watched him sign a feed invoice with a carpenter's pencil. Dad's real signature leaned hard to the right, every letter pressed deep enough to leave an impression on the page beneath it. This one was smooth and rounded. Then I saw the date. October 17th, 4 years earlier. I remember that week because I had flown home after his stroke. Dad had spent 6 days at St. Catherine Medical Center, unable to move his right hand. "Where was this signed?" I asked. Meredith did not blink. "At his residence." A low vibration passed through the floor as a heavy truck rolled outside. Through the window, I saw a tanker marked Bellwether Ridge Landscape Services turning toward the farm road. A blue hose was coiled behind the cab. The same color as the pipe I had noticed beyond the gate. "What are you pulling from my father's land?" I asked. Meredith closed the folder. Her smile returned, but it had lost its warmth. "Community irrigation is not your concern." She stood and straightened her raincoat. "You have 24 hours to remove the truck you left near our entrance. After that, it will be treated as an unauthorized vehicle." I watched her white Escalade leave the parking lot, then looked down at the map again. Whoever had redrawn the property line had erased the sycamore because the tree would have exposed the lie. They had moved the boundary on paper, and they were counting on me never walking the ground. By noon, the rain had thinned to a cold mist, and I was standing at the edge of the North Woods with mud working its way into my boots. Dad had shown me this route when I was a kid, a narrow cattle path that curved behind the ridge and came out near the machine shed. Bellwether Ridge had forgotten about it because polished maps rarely include the places working people actually use. I moved slowly through wet leaves and low branches until the old roofline appeared between the trees. The farmhouse was still there, gray siding, green shutters, the porch sagging slightly on the west corner. For 1 second, relief hit me so hard I had to stop walking. Then I saw the new lock on the front door. Bright brass. Recently installed. A white notice had been taped beside it. Unsafe structure. HOA maintenance control. The paper snapped softly in the wind. I stepped onto the porch and smelled damp wood, mildew, and the faint sweetness of the cedar chest inside the front room. Through the window, I could see Dad's chair, his wool blanket folded over one arm exactly the way he left it. Someone had placed orange inventory stickers on the lamp, the table, and the bookcase. I walked around back. The machine shed doors stood open, but the tractor was gone. In its place were bags of fertilizer, traffic cones, and 2 green utility carts marked Bellwether Ridge Grounds Department. The old horse barn had been turned into storage. Plastic irrigation fittings filled the feed bins. A new trench crossed the pasture in a straight line toward the subdivision, cutting through ground Dad had kept level for 50 years. I followed it to the well house. The wooden door had been removed. Inside, a blue pipe had been connected to the main line, and the pump ran with a steady mechanical hum. The vibration traveled through the concrete floor into my soles. That line was feeding water east, toward the ornamental ponds and sprinkler systems behind Meredith's stone wall. I reached for my phone and started recording. Every fitting. Every serial number. Every fresh tool mark. Then I heard tires on gravel. Brock's security cart came around the barn, followed by Meredith's Escalade and a county patrol vehicle. Deputy Lucas Trent stepped out first. He looked tired, not hostile, which somehow made the moment worse. Meredith held a folder against her chest like she had rehearsed this scene. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "you were told not to enter association-managed property. This is my father's well." I pointed toward the blue pipe. You are pumping water from private land. Deputy Trent glanced at the equipment, then at the documents Meredith handed him. He read them carefully. Sir, I am not saying she is right, he said, but the county system shows an active management transfer and an access agreement. This is a civil dispute until a judge says otherwise. I gave him my deed and the estate letter. He compared the pages, his jaw tightening. These records conflict. Then do not remove me from my own property. Meredith answered before he could. He is interfering with essential community utilities. Brock walked to the old wooden sign near the barn, the one that still read Callahan Farm in faded black paint. He lifted a portable grinder. The motor whined, and sparks scattered across the wet grass as he cut through the metal brackets. The smell of hot steel mixed with rain. I watched the sign fall face down in the mud. Deputy Trent handed me a written trespass warning and spoke quietly. Take this to an attorney. Do not come back through here until the court sorts it out. I looked at Meredith. She was not smiling now. She was studying me, waiting for anger. I folded the warning, placed it in my coat pocket, and took one last photograph of the blue pipe. On the walk back through the woods, I realized they had made one mistake bigger than the gate, the forged signature, and the altered map. They had connected their entire community to something they did not own. Naomi Pierce kept her office above a hardware store in the old courthouse district, where the air smelled like copier toner, floor wax, and fresh lumber from downstairs. She listened without interrupting while I laid out the deed, the estate letter, the photograph of the sycamore, the altered map, and the trespass warning Deputy Trent had handed me. When I showed her the video of the blue pipe running from Dad's well toward Bellwether Ridge, she leaned closer to the screen and replayed it twice. This is not a simple boundary disagreement, she said. But the county record is going to be treated as valid until we prove otherwise. Her words landed with the dull weight of a closing door. Naomi explained that Meredith had filed the management transfer nearly 4 years earlier. The HOA had maintained the road, stationed guards, and used the eastern pasture openly. They would argue that my father accepted those improvements and that I had abandoned any objection by living out of state. An emergency injunction could cost more than $20,000 before the first full hearing. A complete title challenge might take a year. What happens to the farm while we wait? I asked. Naomi looked at the trespass notice. For now, you stay off the disputed section. That evening, Bellwether Ridge held an emergency meeting at its clubhouse. I stood near the back beneath a ceiling fan that clicked every third turn. The room smelled like lemon polish, coffee, and damp coats. Meredith sat behind a long table with a microphone and a stack of prepared statements. She described me as an absentee heir threatening community safety. She said the road, well, and drainage system had been maintained with resident funds. She never mentioned the forged-looking signature or the fact that my father had been in the hospital on the date beside it. When I raised my hand, Brock stepped into the aisle. Meredith gave me exactly 60 seconds. I held up the property tax receipt. My father paid taxes on that land until the day he died. You replaced his locks, used his barn, and connected your irrigation system to his well. A murmur moved through the room. Meredith tapped her microphone. Those claims are unverified. Then she announced that the board had authorized a generous purchase offer to resolve the matter. Brock handed me an envelope. The amount inside was less than half the county assessment, and the offer expired in 48 hours. Meredith called it closure. I called it proof that she needed me to sign away something she claimed she already owned. The storm arrived after midnight. Rain hammered the motel window hard enough to wake me. By dawn, muddy water was pouring through the drainage trench the HOA had cut across the pasture. From the public shoulder, I could see it collecting around Dad's barn. The lower door stood open, and brown water moved around his workbench, feed cabinets, and stacked fence posts. I called the county. They told me the property was under active dispute. I called the HOA office. Brock said an authorized entry would violate the warning. So I stood 50 yards away in cold rain while water climbed around the tools my father had used for 40 years. My hand stayed still, but my jaw ached from holding it closed. Meredith's white Escalade rolled past the gate, its tires whispering over wet asphalt. She slowed just long enough to look at me through the tinted window. Then she drove on. I reached into my coat and felt the brass key, the photograph, and the folded warning. Dad had known the gate would come. He had known the map would lie. And somewhere beneath the sycamore, he had left the reason. By 7 that morning, Naomi had found the one man in the county who still remembered the original Callahan survey. Dale Whitcomb was 72, retired, and living in a small brick house behind the volunteer fire station. His garage smelled like machine oil, dust, and old paper. Survey poles leaned against one wall beside faded county maps rolled into cardboard tubes. Dale studied Dad's photograph under a bright work lamp, then placed the glossy Bellwether Ridge map beside an older plat he pulled from a steel cabinet. He did not speak for almost a minute. His finger moved from the creek bend to the eastern fence line, then stopped where the sycamore should have been. They shifted this boundary, he said. 14 feet west, maybe a little more. 14 feet did not sound like much until Dale traced the consequences. The private gravel road, the security booth, part of the stone entrance, the buried utility lines, and the blue irrigation pipe all sat inside that missing strip. On the HOA map, the sycamore had been removed because the tree was a permanent survey reference listed in the original legal description. Your father knew, Dale said. That tree was the line. Naomi secured written permission from the adjacent landowner for us to approach the sycamore from the northern side without crossing the disputed road. The rain had stopped by afternoon, but water still dripped from the branches. The ground smelled raw and dark. Dale used an old measuring chain and a handheld receiver to confirm the position. The numbers matched the original plat within inches. I knelt beside the roots and brushed away wet leaves with my gloves. At first, I found nothing. Then the brass key in my pocket struck something hard as I leaned forward. Beneath a flat stone was a narrow metal plate, nearly hidden by moss. A keyhole sat in the center. The lock resisted once, then turned with a dry click. A steel box rested inside a shallow concrete chamber between the roots. The lid opened with a long scrape. The smell of rust and trapped earth rose into the cold air. Inside were sealed plastic sleeves containing the original stamped survey, tax receipts, and a temporary road use agreement signed by the developer who built the first section of Bellwether Ridge. The agreement lasted 3 years. It ended automatically if the road was transferred to an HOA. No renewal had ever been signed. Beneath it lay letters Dad had sent Meredith ordering her to stop drawing water from the well. Each one had a certified mail receipt attached. Then Naomi found the medical record. Dad had lost movement in his right hand 6 days before the date on Meredith's transfer agreement. At the bottom of the box sat a small voice recorder wrapped in a shop towel. The batteries were weak, but the screen flickered when I pressed the button. Dad's voice came through thin and grainy. He said Meredith had visited him after the stroke with papers she called a maintenance authorization. He said he refused to sign. He named the nurse who witnessed the conversation. Then he paused, breathing hard, and said the words I had driven 18 years without hearing. Owen, this land is still yours to come home to. I stared at the recorder until the sycamore blurred in front of me. Dale unfolded the stamped survey across the steel lid. Naomi placed Meredith's map beside it. The altered line was obvious now. They had not inherited the road. They had not purchased the well. They had built their gate, their utilities, and their expansion plans on temporary permission that had expired years earlier. I closed the box and turned the brass key in the lock. For the first time since reaching Tennessee, the gate no longer felt like a wall. It felt like evidence. Naomi did not file the full case that afternoon. She filed something quieter. A preservation order. By sunset, Bellwether Ridge was legally required to keep every email, map, invoice, security recording, maintenance log, and utility contract connected to the Callahan property. Meredith received the notice at her office while I sat across town with Dale, comparing survey coordinates under the yellow light of a drafting lamp. I expected her to slow down. She did the opposite. The next morning, construction crews arrived near the eastern pasture with graders, survey stakes, and a banner announcing 42 new homes. Fresh diesel drifted across the ridge. Engines growled behind the stone wall. Meredith had decided that speed could turn a lie into a finished neighborhood before the court caught up. I let her believe it. Dale reset the original boundary points from the public right-of-way and the adjoining property, using the stamped survey and modern satellite measurements. Each coordinate landed inside land the HOA claimed as its own. The security booth sat 8 feet over the line. The gate motor sat 11 feet over. The main irrigation valve sat nearly 14 feet inside Dad's acreage. Naomi hired a licensed utility locator to mark the buried lines. Blue paint traced the water pipe from our well. Red marked the electrical cable powering the gate. Orange revealed communications wiring for the guard booth. Every colored stripe crossed the same boundary Meredith insisted had never existed. I installed weatherproof cameras on trees outside the disputed area, each one aimed at a lawful view of the survey markers and utility corridor. 3 nights later, Brock arrived with 2 maintenance workers. Their flashlights moved through the grass like pale search beams. One man pulled a newly placed marker from the soil. Another photographed the sycamore and measured the steel box beneath its roots. Brock made a phone call. The camera microphone caught his words clearly. Meredith wants this gone before the county inspector comes. They left the box untouched, but the marker disappeared into their cart. Naomi saved the recording in 3 locations before breakfast. Then the paperwork started flowing. Meredith signed a contractor statement declaring that Bellwether Ridge owned the access road without restriction. Grant Sloan submitted the same claim to the county planning office. Their development company used that declaration to support a construction loan worth several $millions. Each signature tightened the knot. Each document turned an old boundary dispute into something larger. I still did not close the road. I did not touch the pump. I did not argue with the guards. I parked legally along the county shoulder every morning and photographed the trucks passing through Dad's gate. Meredith began waving at me from her Escalade, certain my silence meant defeat. On the 5th day, Naomi obtained access to the utility inspection records. The HOA had listed the water source as a community-owned well, but the serial number matched Dad's pump. The brass key opened the old control cabinet beside the sycamore, where the original manufacturer plate was still bolted inside. The electrical meter, pressure switch, and shut-off assembly were all registered to Thomas Callahan. Dad had kept every repair tag dated and signed. His careful handwriting covered the inside of the door like a mechanical diary. The final entry had been written 6 weeks before his stroke. Private farm well. No permanent connection authorized. I ran my thumb over the faded ink and closed the cabinet. Meredith thought I was waiting for permission to fight back. I was not. I was waiting for her to finish proving my case. The groundbreaking ceremony began. At 10 o'clock beneath a white canopy near the eastern pasture. Gold shovels stood in a row beside a sign promising 42 luxury homes, walking trails, and private water access. Meredith wore a navy suit and the same gold HOA pin she had worn at the gate. Grant stood beside her with county officials, contractors, and a bank representative. Residents gathered with paper cups of coffee while a photographer adjusted his lens. The air smelled like fresh mulch, diesel exhaust, and damp clay. Meredith stepped toward the microphone just as 3 county vehicles turned onto the road. A sheriff's cruiser followed them. Then came Naomi's sedan and Dale's faded pickup. The talking stopped one voice at a time. Naomi walked beneath the canopy carrying a sealed court order. Meredith Sloan, she said, this project is suspended effective immediately. Meredith stared at the paper but did not take it. On whose authority? The Circuit Court, the County Land Office, and the Environmental Compliance Division. Behind Naomi, 2 inspectors began photographing the blue utility markings across the grass. Dale unrolled the original survey on a folding table and placed Meredith's map beside it. The difference was impossible to miss. Her boundary line ran 14 feet west of the stamped legal line. That narrow strip contained the road, the gate controls, the guard booth, the irrigation main, and part of the drainage system serving Bellwether Ridge. The bank representative stepped closer. We were told the association held unrestricted access. Naomi opened a second folder. That statement was signed last week by Mrs. Sloan and her husband. The only recorded access agreement expired years ago and terminated automatically when control passed to the HOA. Grant's face lost its color. Meredith reached for the microphone. This is a misunderstanding. Thomas Callahan authorized everything. Naomi pressed play on Dad's recorder. His voice came through the portable speaker, thin but clear. He described Meredith visiting after his stroke. He said he refused to sign. He named the nurse who had been present. Then Naomi displayed the hospital record confirming that Dad could not use his right hand on the date of the supposed transfer. The crowd shifted. Coffee cups lowered. One resident near the front whispered that the signature had to be false. Brock stood beside the security booth, watching Meredith instead of me. Deputy Trent approached him and asked about the missing survey marker. Brock looked toward the cameras mounted along the tree line. He knew exactly what they had captured. He removed his radio from his belt and handed it over. "I have the work orders," he said. "Mrs. Sloan told us to remove anything that marked the old boundary." Meredith turned toward him. "You were following maintenance procedure." "I was following your written instructions." He produced his phone. Messages, photographs, and time-stamped directives filled the screen. The county inspector placed an orange closure notice on the construction sign. Another inspector shut down the irrigation connection at the valve, not by damaging anything, but by sealing it under the court order. The pump fell silent. The sudden quiet rolled across the pasture like weather. Meredith moved toward her Escalade, opened the door, and started the engine. The vehicle glided toward the entrance, but the gate did not respond. Under the court order, power to the controls had been disconnected at Dad's cabinet because the equipment sat on private land. Her Escalade stopped beneath the brass letters she had used to keep me out. She lowered the window and shouted for Brock. He did not move. I walked to the edge of the road with the brass key in my hand. The wet metal felt cold against my palm. "My father never gave you this road," I said. "He gave temporary permission to people he trusted. You mistook his kindness for ownership." Behind me, workers covered the ceremonial shovels. In front of me, Meredith sat trapped by the symbol she had built for everyone else. For the first time, the gate recognized the wrong owner. The court order was only the beginning. Over the next 3 weeks, county investigators pulled records from the HOA office, the planning department, and Grant Sloan's development company. The paper trail was cleaner than the pasture after a hard rain. Meredith had approved the false boundary map. Grant had used it to support the construction loan. The HOA had billed residents for water taken from Dad's well, charged maintenance fees for a road it did not own, and used association funds to improve land that legally belonged to my family. The forged transfer agreement was sent to the district attorney for review. Grant resigned from the county planning board before the first public hearing. Meredith was removed as HOA president by a vote so overwhelming that even the residents who once applauded her speeches refused to meet her eyes. The white Escalade disappeared from Bellwether Ridge a week later. Brock turned over every work order, text message, and security log in exchange for cooperating with investigators. Deputy Trent came to the farm one afternoon carrying the original trespass warning. He stood beside Dad's porch while the smell of cut grass drifted across the yard. "This should never have been issued," he said. He tore the notice in half and handed me the dismissal order instead. I kept both pieces. Not because I wanted the memory, but because Dad believed records mattered. Bellwether Ridge was ordered to remove the stone entrance, security booth, irrigation line, and drainage trench from the Callahan property. The association also had to pay for repairs to the barn, replace the damaged fence, and reimburse the estate for every gallon of water documented through the pump meter. Residents expected me to close the road immediately. Legally, I could have done it. I could have placed the old chain across the cedar posts and forced more than 100 families to find another route. Instead, I offered them a temporary access agreement while they rebuilt their board and created a lawful entrance on subdivision land. My only conditions were simple. No private security at the farm. No HOA authority beyond the true boundary. Full public accounting of every dollar Meredith's board had spent. The residents accepted within 2 days. By early spring, the stone wall was gone. The ornamental lights had been removed, and gravel covered the place where the guard booth once stood. I repaired the old Callahan farm sign using the same metal. Brackets Brock had cut. The grinder left dark marks along the edges, but I did not sand them away. Some scars belong in the finished work. I mounted the sign between 2 new cedar posts near the county road. Beneath it, inside a small glass box, I placed Dad's brass key. The well returned to farm use. The blue pipe was removed. The drainage trench was filled and graded until rainwater once again followed the natural slope toward the creek. On the first quiet evening after the repairs were finished, I sat on the porch in Dad's chair. The boards creaked under my boots. Cattle moved through the lower pasture, and the old pump shuddered beneath the kitchen window with the same uneven rhythm I remembered from childhood. I played Dad's recording one last time, then set the machine beside his photograph. I had come home believing I was too late to make peace with him. I was wrong. He had left me a road back, hidden beneath a tree and protected by patience. Meredith built a gate to erase my family's name from the land. In the end, the court ordered her gate removed, while Dad's sign stood exactly where it had always belonged. Justice did not arrive with noise. It arrived with an old survey, a brass key, and my father's real signature.